Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday, so that means I'm welcoming you to another episode of Chaz Calenda, attorney at law, here on the Coalition Radio Network. I'm your host, Chaz Calenda, attorney at the law firm of Inman and Torgy here in Coventry, Rhode Island. And as usual, I'll be hosting tonight's show, and most importantly, I'll always be putting the law above politics. And please, if you can, after the show, please take a minute to like the Coalition Radio Network on Facebook and support them going forward to keep up with all their top notch content. We're continuing this series tonight. We're going to touch on various legal topics here on Rhode Island and nationally. Tonight, we're going to discuss the recent controversy in North Kingstown Public Schools surrounding a book prominently displayed for students, which depicts graphic sexual contact being and graphic sexual acts being performed by minors, whether there's a legal problem with that, and the heated discussions that have resulted from the questions being asked by parents objecting to the book's depictions. We'll also discuss the utter lack of governmental transparency in Rhode Island, despite strong public records and open meeting laws. And finally, I'll do my best to take some questions on various legal topics from my guest, a guest who needs no introduction. She's Nicole Solis, stay-at-home mom with a legal background who had the gall to ask her school district to provide her with some public records on what their curriculum included and was sued and targeted as a result of her APRA requests. Nicole is here to discuss these topics with me tonight. Nicole, thank you for coming on the show, and it's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Hi, Chaz. Really happy to be here and talking to you.
I'm very glad to have you because we have a lot to talk about based on what's been going on over these last few weeks. And we'll just jump right into it. Most people already know your story. You've kind of hit the national scene on various different shows and podcasts, whatever it's been on. And, your story is well known. So, recently we've been talking about some of these issues that are going on in our local public schools. I mean, you started it here in South Kingstown, simply making requests for public information, and they demonized and targeted you as a result. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, well, I wanted to know if they were teaching critical race theory or gender theory in school. My daughter was enrolled in kindergarten, and they told me to submit public records requests because they didn't want to answer my questions just in an email. So I did what they told me to do, and I submitted public records requests. And I submitted a lot because it was the only way I could afford to buy the information that would come out of those public records requests. So for those of you that don't know, when you submit a public records request, they give you an estimate of how much that costs. And this a public entity can charge $15 an hour to compile and gather all that information. And for me, I had an estimate as high as $74,000 to know what was being taught regarding critical race theory. I had another estimate for $9,000 to get emails of a school committee member. So I had to submit a lot of little questions that would come back as like $15. Long story short, they didn't like that I did that. They had a public meeting where they vilified me, let people call me racist in public comments. They ultimately decided not to sue me. I think they never meant to sue me. They just wanted to try to humiliate me, but it backfired. And then after that, the teachers union is now suing me because they don't want public information coming out of my public records requests. So this has all been the past 4 or 5 months, and here we are today with yet another public school controversy.
It's absolutely true. I mean, just on the basis that you were seeking public information, $74,000 billed at $15 an hour. I can't. I'm no mathematician, but that would tell me that somebody's not doing anything for months and months at a time, other than doing research. But yeah, to me, that just kind of reeks of you want the information, fork over all this money, and maybe we'll give it to you, maybe not.
Yeah, because you could also just get back a ton of redacted information that you just paid all this money for. And it's always, like a surprise on what you're going to get. And then if you don't get, if they give you something that isn't what you asked for, then you have to file a complaint with the attorney general. So it's a very long process that may not even give you what you want. And I can see why people give up and they just say, I just need my kid to go to school.
Right. And obviously you've taken those routes. You filed your complaints with the attorney general, and to my knowledge, there's not been much help in the way coming your way from that office. But we'll certainly get to him later because he certainly plays into our main topic tonight, which is the was it Gender Queer, I believe the name of the book is, in the North Kingstown Public Schools, which was prominently displayed in a bookcase originally. I think they maybe have since taken it down, but it was prominently displayed in a bookcase for all their students, and which, by all accounts, and I think you've shared some of the graphics that were involved in there, and as many people have, by all accounts, depict illustrations of minors engaging in graphic sexual acts, and I think in some of them uh, you can even interpret them. I don't know if it's even an interpretation. It looks pretty clear to me whether some of these minors are engaging in sexual acts with adults, and obviously there were a lot of parents that had a problem with that, and whether or not that actually violated state and federal child pornography laws, which prohibit the mere possession of child pornography, never mind possible distribution of it. That is obviously banned under both state and federal law. And Attorney General Nerona, who would be tasked, his office would be tasked with charging anyone who may be violating that law here in the state of Rhode Island, had occasion to weigh in on whether or not that book constituted the legal definition of child pornography. And I want to point out, he did this yesterday on Tara Granahan's show. She's on WPRO weekdays, 9 a.m. to noon. And I believe it was yesterday that she had the Attorney General on. And I'd like to play the first clip when she basically directly asked him, is this child pornography? And if so, what do we do about it? I don't know if we can cue up that first clip and then we'll react to it.
Who determines whether or not this is child pornography? How do we label this situation? I have to ask you, have you seen the book?
I haven't. No, it's been characterized to me, but I haven't seen it. No.
All right, I sent it off to the folks in your office just because I thought it's beyond what I've seen ever, and it's in a comic book type of illustration, so that's appealing to a certain group of, I think, young teens or whatever. How do we determine whether or not it's child pornography?
Yeah, look, I caught the end of your last interview, and I think it's important that I came on. I mean, when you reached out yesterday, Tara, about whether this is child pornography or not, I think I take these opportunities with you and others to kind of explain what the law is. As a career prosecutor, which is frankly what I am. So you talk to any career prosecutor, and the first thing they ask when they're presented with a child pornography case, and we get many, many, many of them, both here in the federal system and here in the state system, is it an actual child? Meaning, you got to make sure it's an actual child, an identifiable child. Mm-hmm. So, when I heard that this book was characterized as a cartoon book, that is the end of the child pornography inquiry. The law is very clear on that. This is a Supreme Court case from 2002, Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition. I invite your listeners to take a look at the case because it really walks through what child pornography is. And child pornography requires the government, federal or state, to prove that the child depicted is an actual child. Now, you don't have to identify who the child is, but you've got to establish it's a child.
So I happened to take up the Attorney General on his request that her listeners read those cases, and I did read Ashcroft, and a lot of things he said were correct, and I'm going to give him credit for knowing the case, but as a former federal prosecutor, I'd expect him to know that. But Ashcroft did say that it does have to be an actual minor. They did generally say that illustrations or virtual child pornography were probably protected under the First Amendment, but they're still subject to obscenity laws. And if they are found to be obscene materials, like engaging in graphic sexual acts, they could still fall under the child pornography prohibition, virtual pornography prohibition. And there have been cases that followed Ashcroft based on the Protect Law, I believe it was called. The it was a law that was passed after Ashcroft, which actually kind of settled, I think, the issue, because there's been two successful prosecutions on virtual child pornography since the Ashcroft case. And it was ones that were dealing with, they call it manga. It's basically a Japanese style of animation or illustrations. And he was pleading, there was an individual who pled guilty to that. There was also another case of the Worley case out of Virginia, where they anime style cartoons, which were also virtual child pornography, where the person was there was minors depicted engaging in sexual contact with adults. So, the fact that Attorney General Norona got on the air yesterday with Tara Granahan and made a certain statement that said it's the end of the discussion, that if it's a cartoon or it's an illustration, it can't be child porn, was misleading at best and deceptive at worst. Would you agree, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I knew the federal obscenity law that you were talking about. And, it would be one thing if he said, for my job, it's the end of the discussion because I'm interested in the state law. And then to maybe encourage parents to call the U.S. attorney and say, there's this other federal, he did say that it might apply, but he did dismiss it too, right? Because he's like, oh, these are far and few between. This never works out. And he was dismissive and discouraging, and kind of made it seem like it was no big deal. And it's a very big deal, because if he is prosecuting all of these sexual abuse cases, he should know that there is a correlation between showing children pornography and grooming them for sexual abuse. So this is no small matter, especially if it's available in a school where children are trusting the adults that are providing them with this material. So I think, I'm glad that he talked about the state law and that you need an identifiable minor, but we need to go to the next step and give parents the tools on the next thing they can do to protect their kids. And for me, that's submitting this evidence to the U.S. attorney and seeing where that's going to go.
Well, yeah, and it certainly, I'd love to hear what happens when you do that. But Mr. Peter Norona, does have a state law to deal with, and one of the other things that he said uh, on one of these clips was that the state law, and this kind of seems like he was anticipating a rebuttal to what he had already said, is that the state law, you know, you could look at the state law, which is found at 1191.3. You can look at the definition of child pornography, which is any visual depiction, including any photograph, film, video, picture, or computer generated image or picture, whether made or produced by electronic, mechanical, or other means, of sexually explicit conduct, where the production of such visual depiction involves the use of a minor engaging in sexually explicit conduct. That's one of them. That alone, right there, under state law, is one of the ways it can be child pornography. Now, it can go into other areas where also can be child pornography. But Attorney General Norona said, well, even if you're looking at state law and you think that it might fall on there, the U.S. Supreme Court would certainly strike it down if it wasn't a real minor and hold that it violated the First Amendment. I would love to know. I honestly would love to know how the Attorney General would be able to predict with that kind of confidence, what the United States Supreme Court would do, which is we're now almost 20 years after the Ashcroft case. 20 years after the Ashcroft case, with a completely different composition of justices on that court. I'd love to know how he could confidently predict that, because if he can do that, he should go play Powerball this week, because he may not have to work much longer, because he could retire if he has that kind of foresight. But he's got he may have actually a stricter law under state law that he may have to consider this with. And the fact that he was so dismissive, and if we could pull up his next quote, I think you can kind of hear the dismissiveness in his tone that you're referring to, Nicole. That this is no big deal. This is something that you got to deal with. Parents have to deal with on a local level, and it's not really any of his business. If we could pull up that second clip from the Tara Granahan show, we can hear him say it.
Then what is it? Because this is hard now because you haven't seen the illustrations or the comic book, what I guess I have to say illustrations, but it's clearly young, young boys in sexual acts illustrated. So what do you do with that? I mean, it's more than what you would see even in Playboy. So is it just sexually explicit content? I can't find anyone that thinks it belongs in a school.
So Tara, look, there are two things. One is whether or not parents, community members, school boards think certain material is appropriate for a school. That's not my charge, right? I'm a prosecutor.
Right.
So it either falls into the category of child pornography, which just plainly doesn't. It just doesn't, because it's a cartoon.
That's it's just one of those. Here it is. I've never heard a lawyer speak in such absolute terms. I mean, I know you're not practicing right now, Nicole, but it's not it's not something that you hear very often.
Yeah, you normally hear, well, it depends. And you normally would expect a lawyer to look at the images before he talks about it. I was kind of shocked that he didn't even look at it, because I'm pretty sure you have to be looking at the material before you make an assessment on whether it's pornographic or obscene.
Absolutely. There is no way when you have to go through the standard, which even he talked about, the Miller standard, which deals with obscenity. And when you were looking at that in the context of whether or not you can charge somebody under a child pornography statute and not violate the First Amendment, you got to look at it. You've got to do an analysis. Does this have any sort of redeeming quality to it other than appealing to a prurient interest? And does this actually depict a minor or someone who could be readily identified as a minor engaging in an explicit sexual act? Now, this book is framed, at least in reviews, as a memoir. As if I read it correctly, it's somewhat of a memoir from the author of perhaps personal experiences that the author may have gone through, or people that the author knew going through. So, when we're looking at child pornography, the whole overarching theme is, does the image harm children, or the making of that image harm children? Were any children actually harmed? Did he do any sort of investigation to find out if that happened? Because if there was a child molestation, if there was a minor engaging in sexual acts with an adult in Rhode Island, there's no statute of limitations to that. First or second degree child molestation, there's no look back period that says, oh, we're too late, we're out of time to do that. So if he didn't look at it, he didn't read it, he didn't do any investigation, I don't know how he makes statements like that. It's irresponsible. It's shirking his duty as the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Rhode Island to just make these blanket claims and saying, well, this is not really my job.
Yeah, I agree. And I was on the air the same day he went on, and I said the same thing. I said, this is really irresponsible. It was just so just as a parent, it was so discouraging to see that someone in a position of power that could stand up for kids and parents was really sending the message that he's just not interested. I understand he said that this is a matter for local school boards, but we're not exactly in an age of God, I don't know what to call it, like federalism, because now we have the FBI coming into school boards. So everyone's changing their lanes. I don't know why suddenly the attorney general says this is just not his lane. We need someone to protect our kids, and we need to use the law to do that, because it's really the only thing we have right now, is to find ways that we can use already existing laws to protect kids from stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And he came into office, and I've blasted him many times for saying this to the Boston Globe shortly after he took office, was he was going to be an activist attorney general. I don't think anyone should be an activist in law enforcement, but you certainly should use the tools that are available to you. And I don't think there's anybody, at least any sane thinking person, that would start encouraging an attorney general or chief law enforcement officer of any state or any of the federal government to ignore situations where children could be at potential risk for harm. And I heard it from other callers on Tara's show the other day, and from online. You look at postings on Twitter, on Facebook. They're experts who have weighed in, experts who are well versed on what people who are trying to groom kids for to recruit them to engage in these kind of sexual acts with adults. I mean, and people who are weighing in on this, who have backgrounds in this, saying this is classic style grooming. This poses a great danger to our children. And you have our attorney general saying, "Oh, no way, no chance. This is not going to work." To me, is irresponsible. I mean, he's and I'm going to say this from my own perspective. I've known Peter Nerona for several years. I actually worked under his office at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 2 of those years. And I think he thinks like a federal prosecutor. And many federal prosecutors don't like to take risks where they could lose a case. Don't like to take risks where the case is not handed to them with a bow wrapped around it and said, "Here you go. Here's your conviction. Please don't throw me in jail for 100 years." That's just the mentality of many federal prosecutors. And it's a mentality, unfortunately, of a lot of state prosecutors. They don't like to lose because they see themselves as above the fray. They see themselves as, the ones out there, doing the right thing. But I don't know how he can take that position given his almost flippant and I don't really have much thought on this one way or the other than I could say it's definitely not child pornography, even though I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and I get that, from a political perspective, you don't want to be a prosecutor that loses, right? Like who's going to elect prosecutors that lose? But my opinion is if you're fighting to protect kids and you want to take a risk to, make sure that they're not exposed to this and see if the force of the law can protect them, even if you lose that fight, you just sent a message to the people of Rhode Island that you're going to fight for kids at the risk of losing a case, and I think that's something that people would appreciate.
Certainly, I think people would appreciate that, and I want to be clear. People are gonna attack either you, me, whoever else is speaking out on this, because they're gonna say, well, this is really just an anti-gay or anti-transgender diatribe. That's really the objection here. You don't want that message to get out. And I just wanted to be clear. I don't think anybody's made that objection. I think that was made very clear. Multiple times through multiple people who have raised objections about this book, that this is just an agenda by some, right-wing, nut jobs that just don't like transgender people or gay people. And I don't think anybody's even come close to making that argument. So, I mean, I want to put that one right there. And I also don't think that using criminal laws to push a social agenda or not push a social agenda is always the right thing to do, or any time is the right thing to do. We're not asking him to break the law. We're not asking him to write his own law, but we are asking him to use the tools that are at his disposal to do something to protect kids from situations like this. And I looked, just kind of took a look through Rhode Island General Laws, Title 11, Chapter 9, which deals with children. And there, it may not be as powerful as the child pornography law, but there is a law in there that is called contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And it really applies to anybody who has control over a minor, that allows them to be in any sort of lewd situation, or encourages them to break a law, or encourages them to be in a situation which would be in a delinquent situation. For those of you who are following that, don't practice generally in juvenile situations, delinquent would essentially be the term that is used for a minor who is engaging in activity which would otherwise be criminal if they were an adult, or activity that may be immoral if they were an adult. So, that's one tool that is perhaps that's certainly already on the books. The United States Supreme Court has not struck down any portion of the child pornography law here in Rhode Island, the state law. So for him to say that, as confidently as he has been, is just is misleading, 100% misleading to anybody who was listening to him talk the other day. And I think there's one more clip that I want to have you react to, Nicole, because I think this is where you get to his dismissive attitude of this whole thing. You can almost hear him laughing as he's saying these quotes, and I think that's what really rubbed people the wrong way. And if we could just cue up that third clip from Tara Granahan's show yesterday, we can react to that.
Well, I've got to tell you, I'm getting a slew of emails saying it feels like nobody in authority cares about this, and the parents are really, really upset. Not just you, the Attorney General, in general. I mean, it is a very explicit, obscene drawings, if you will, and for the superintendent to say it's about sexual health. There's nothing in the book about sexual health, about condoms, about you could understand if there was a book about having sex and being careful and being cautious. This is not any of the above. So if it's not, so let's just run it down. It's not child pornography. You said pornography is legal. We know that. Is pornography legal in schools, to have a book that would be labeled pornography in schools?
Yeah, look, what the Rhode Island statutes ban are child pornography. I've explained why it isn't. It's not a matter of me caring or not. It's a matter of me doing my job and understanding what the law is, okay? That's what my charge is here. We got a lot on our plate here. We look at every case the same way. What are the facts? What's the law? It's clearly not child pornography, as that phrase is defined, state or federal. Okay? So the question becomes, is it obscenity? Is it obscenity? Now, if someone believes that this book is obscene, then bring it to the FBI, bring it to the state police, and we'll take a look at it. What I'm trying to explain is that an obscenity case is so incredibly difficult to prove that the odds of this being obscene, I think, are pretty low. That doesn't mean it's appropriate for schools. Doesn't mean that I think that it is. I haven't read it.
There's the kicker right at the end there. I haven't even read it, but it's like he's almost like laughing as he's saying this. And it's like, yeah, bring it over. We'll take a look at it, but it's not gonna change my mind at all. So I'm glad we have such an open-minded Attorney General over here that's looking out for all of Rhode Islanders. So I mean, what was your reaction to that, hearing that? Because I know you weighed in, and you've weighed in a lot on this. What was your reaction to hearing that? Just being a citizen, with kids, just being concerned about what you're seeing here.
I was floored because when he said he didn't read it, but that obscenity cases are hard to bring. Well, I mean, are we just getting just this general lesson about obscenity? Because you had an opportunity to actually maybe do a little analysis for people on the air and say, okay, here's the Miller test, and this is what I think. And I probably would have respected his analysis a little better if he did that. But he's basically just saying that obscenity law is useless. No one's ever going to win anything. And even when it really matters, when it's something that kids are exposed to, it's like, oh, don't even try. So I just thought that was so really, again, just irresponsible, because he should have had a better answer about this particular book as obscenity. The pictures are everywhere. Tara Granahan sent it to him. All he had to do was look at his phone for a second. I understand, no, he didn't have time to read the whole book, but, he could have at least said, yeah, I looked at this, and my opinion in terms of the legal standard for obscenity is XYZ. Instead, he was just like, my job isn't to care. Well, okay, you could have cared about this particular book, though, and before you came on the air and just dismissed it. So,
do your homework.
I think we all know where he stands when it comes to. Yeah, I thought it was more or less unprepared, and he could have looked at it right then and there on the air, just take out your phone. But I don't think he was really all that interested in a more in-depth analysis. And that's a shame, because we do have to protect kids. I understand he is protecting kids more downstream after they're abused and broken, but there's something to say for protecting kids upstream before they're abused and broken. But that's
Do we
probably
have to
not as
wait?
heroic a position to be in when you're, saving them from being abused rather than, prosecuting the bad guys after kids are abused.
Right. Do we need to be waiting for kids to be abused physically or mentally or whatever it is before we start taking action? I mean, the whole goal is to prevent the harm that can occur to the kids. And if he's, if he's going to take such a lackadaisical attitude on the proactive side, I think that's a problem when you're the chief law enforcement officer of a state, and you're looking at issues that mean a lot to a lot of members of the public, and you do have tools to do these things, to take them on, and you just kind of choose not to because you've already made up your mind, or you have a political agenda, or whatever it is. And I know I certainly have my opinions on that. I'm sure you have yours. I'm sure a lot of people made their opinions known. I certainly saw a lot of opinions posted the other day, when he came on after that, and the follow-ups that came from that. And it's disappointing because it seems to be a pattern from that office. Is certain things get more attention or more, um, I would say are more important politically for that office than doing the right thing. And that's the office's main goal. The office's main rule should be doing the right thing all the time and get justice for all, protecting Rhode Islanders within the bounds of the law. And for him to make a definite statement like that without doing the analysis, at least doing it for us so we can all hear it. He's an elected official, so we can all hear his reasoning, and not leaving out parts that don't fit his preconceived notions. Give us the full analysis and say, you know what, maybe likely it wouldn't work, but it's possible that if you do the analysis and you go through these steps, there could be a situation where this might work, and explain to people that this is what you can do. But there does come back to a point that I do want to get to, is that you know there may be tools in his quiver, so to speak, that he can go after, but ultimately, our local level and our state lawmakers can do better at helping us make the laws, help our children, help people, our parents, and do better to protect the children and protect Rhode Islanders. And they certainly could write a statute that's a little more buttoned up. They certainly could be a little bit more proactive in that. And you certainly could have school committee members, be a little bit more responsive to the concerns of parents. And it just goes back to the old saying that be careful who you vote for, because these are the people who are making the policies that are ultimately going to be carried out. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about how, maybe we have a legislative action that we could take, or at least an opportunity. I don't know how far it'll go in Rhode Island, but, to say that maybe we don't need an identifiable minor in it for the purpose of school, that cartoons do count if it's being distributed in school. So we can narrow that down so that way we don't create this loophole for people to be abusing kids without legal consequence. And I'm sure maybe schools would appreciate that too, because then they don't have to worry about making, well, what I think is an easy decision, but apparently for them it's a hard decision to make a decision about this book. Um, and then we could just have more of a black and white rule that if you have cartoon depictions of kids engaging in sex acts, that's not allowed in school, and it's a Rhode Island statute. You don't need an identifiable minor. You just need common sense. So, maybe that's a better way to do it, but, I'm still going to do what I can to see if this violates obscenity law, and if there's an attorney brave enough who wants to give it a go.
I certainly wish you the best of luck there, because I know you're not going to get a whole lot of help from the Attorney General in your quest there. I certainly hope you have better luck on the local level, to try to at least get the school boards to be held accountable, and the school districts to be held accountable for making this, I guess, almost required reading. I don't know. That seems like they endorsed, at least the North Kingstown. I don't know if it was the superintendent or the principal that endorsed the book itself in an email back to a parent. I mean, it was I mean, that email was detached from reality, if you ask me. It is absolutely nothing to do about practicing safe sex or understanding, sexual, sexual acts. I mean, for healthy reasons. I have no idea what the heck they were talking about. Do you?
So it's a story of I think it's a memoir or a coming of age story about someone who is grappling with their gender identity. And so I think the superintendent believes that this book should be respected for that reason, but I find that to be really objectifying and demeaning to say that people who are struggling with their gender identity or sexual orientation should be exposed to pornography to, explore that. I mean, we don't say that about heterosexual kids. Do we give heterosexual kids pornography as they're coming of age and sexually developing? No. So why would we do that with kids that are gay, transgendered, or questioning? It just seems really dehumanizing to that minority of kids. So I don't agree that even that argument is a good one to make. I think it's actually a terrible one to make. And no child should be exposed to porn. It's not good for you ever.
I agree. I mean, I agree. I don't know how someone can make a statement like that. It's just because it's a story of, struggling with your gender identity, that all of a sudden you need to be given these graphic, depictions of sexual acts, which by any definition of graphic depiction of sexual acts, I mean, it clearly fits. So, I mean, I don't know why that applies only to transgender students or gay students or anybody what that is. I mean, to me, that is an insult. If I were one of those kids, I'd feel insulted by that. If I was a parent of one of those kids, I'd feel insulted by that, because you're right. They don't go out and hand out Hustler to heterosexual kids when they're doing that. They teach them. Maybe I'm showing my age. I'm sure they call it something different now, but they used to call it sex education when I was in school. You had to have your parents sign the permission slip to go sit through it. I think it was like in fifth or sixth grade or something it started. And, but they didn't give you a Hustler magazine. They gave you like biological and an anatomical diagrams, and they explained to you, you know, biological functions, how it all happens. Obviously,
Yeah.
that's not what this is.
No, this is, actually on Amazon, I think it's on Amazon, they described it as a really great way to bond with your friends over like fanfare erotica. So I mean, it's even described as erotica, and that doesn't have anything to do with sexual health. That has to do with sexual arousal. So to equate that with sexual health for transgendered kids really strips them of their dignity. Like they should be able to learn about sexual health while still maintaining their dignity and not being exposed to pornography. Um, but I do have a question for you. If I don't know
Sure.
if it's a good time to ask a question. I don't want
Yeah,
to steal your
we do.
platform. Okay. So I think one of the most frustrating parts of the Miller test with determining whether something is obscenity is determining whether it's the last prong. You have to determine whether it has serious merit, serious literary merit, political merit, something like that. And we're sort of living in this upside down time where really anything can have political merit if you just say it does, right? So I think
Sure.
maybe the AG was thinking of that, but that's up to the community to decide whether it has that. That's there isn't a national standard for that. If I interpreted it right, it's up to your community to decide whether this particular book has serious literary merit and serious political merit. And so I don't want people to be discouraged by that last part, because if you as a community don't want this book in, and you're looking at the obscenity law, it could be determined to be obscenity because your community is not happy with this, and they don't respect it as something that has serious literary or political merit or artistic merit. So I think
And
the community
and
standard
there you
is
go.
really important there.
And there you go, Nicole. And that's what makes what he did so irresponsible, because the word serious is in there. And what do we as lawyers call that if there's a difference of opinion on a element of a crime, in this case, a crime? What do we call that? We call that a dispute of fact. And who gets to settle disputes of fact? The fact finder, and that's usually a jury in a criminal case, or and it can be a judge depending on the situation. So to come out and say, you know, as the attorney general, I'm saying that of course it's got serious literary, scientific, political value. Well, you don't get to make that decision. You can say, my opinion. That's my opinion, but it's ultimately, in my reading of that, it's a fact finder position. There's it's complete, not supported unless a decision by the fact finder is completely not supported by evidence in the record. I don't know how that gets made without going to a trial, and that is one of the tests that you have to do in the Miller test in order to determine whether or not things are obscene and whether they could possibly fall under the guise of child pornography. So it's a great question, and it's a great point to go back to exactly why what he said was such a problem yesterday.
Yeah. And I also heard you say that, you don't always think it's appropriate to bring a criminal prosecution against people in schools. And I agree. I don't want schools to be full of people that are scared that they're going to be criminally prosecuted if they made an honest mistake. But I wonder, though, if you were to bring an obscenity prosecution, I mean, it's for obscenity. I mean, is someone going to be punished for providing this obscene material? Like, what's the consequence if this book is found to be obscene? Do you know?
Well,
Like, is it
if
just
the book is found to
removed?
be obscene, I mean, there could be criminal penalties, but again, there's a wide range. There's a wide range of things that can be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be criminal. There could be civil enforcement actions. So there are civil obscenity enforcement rules that can be done. It doesn't have, it's not like, okay, it's obscene, you're going to jail. It's not as black and white as that. It's and even people who are convicted of such crimes, there are deferred sentencing options, there are community options, alternative resolutions to criminal cases that are don't put people in jail, that give people the opportunity to correct their mistakes and become productive members of society without the stigma of a criminal conviction going forward. So it's one of those situations where the attorney general does have a lot of authority to decide which mechanisms are the most appropriate for that circumstance. Because I agree, you don't want school officials, you don't want government officials being in constant fear of being prosecuted by an overzealous activist AG who's going to use the criminal justice system for political purposes. But you do want there to be some thought going into their minds that if we're going to push this kind of agenda, which has such potentially devastating legal consequences, and it's really upsetting members of our community, and it's potentially criminal, depending on whether or not you can make that analysis fit. Maybe people will give it a little bit more thought than just this is my political position, and I'm sticking with it. So it's not that I want people in constant fear of prosecution. I'm 100% against that. But let's hold people accountable where appropriate, and not just dismiss it out of hand without doing a serious legal analysis. That's how I would answer your question.
Totally agree. Yeah. Yep. I totally agree with you.
So Nicole, I noticed you had
I
solicited Rhode Islanders about some legal questions that they may have for me, and I certainly want to give you the opportunity to ask me at least a few before we go off the air, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, good. I was just gonna bring it up. So the first question that's the most on point we have from a guy named Monster on Twitter. And he says, so distribution of pornography to minors is a felony. Why isn't he charging the school district of educators who deemed it appropriate? I would love to know this before the next election. And I think that's basically what our whole conversation was about, that, if you can basically say that this doesn't fall under pornography or child pornography under the law, then there's nothing to charge. Okay. Um, so then we have a question that says, if the Attorney General refuses to do anything about the obscene materials in school, what other recourse do parents have? So he says, are parents giving up their parental rights by simply enrolling children in these public schools, giving the schools the right to teach whatever they wish? And you touched on other legal avenues, like, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. But I think what he's talking more about is, what can we do if we're not lawyers that are going to, bring charges or civil suits? Do you know, like, maybe that's not a great question, because I'm like, what can we do that doesn't have to do with the law? But I think he is talking about some kind of recourse that will hold them accountable under the law, but maybe isn't a civil suit. What do you think?
It's a tough situation, because I've had, in a different context, I've had a lot of people contact me about, say the vaccine mandates or the mask mandates going on in schools. Like, what can we do if the government's not going to do anything for us as people? So, like, the question seems to be, what can we as parents do if the attorney general is not going to take any action, the police aren't going to take any action, maybe the U.S. attorney doesn't take any action? What can we do to protect our kids? That's the way I interpret the question. I mean, it's a tough question, and there's no real solid answer to that, other than you need to be as active as possible in your local politics, your local school boards, your local school districts, your local elections, your state reps, your state senators. They're the ones making these policies. They're the ones who are ultimately implementing these policies. If you don't like it, you need to get people involved. The powers and the numbers, the powers at the ballot box. And I know that's easier said than done. I know it, especially in a state like Rhode Island, where it's basically one party rule. But this is something that I've found has caught, has crossed party lines at this point. A lot of this stuff has crossed party lines. Is just, how much are you willing to put up with? How much are you willing to have your kids put up with? And, there are options other than putting them in public school. It's not an option for everybody. I understand that. But there are options of homeschooling, alternative schooling, going to a place that's going to reflect your values more as a family. But ultimately, the powers at the ballot box, because, they're up for election every so often. And, all I can tell you is that if you don't get them out, this will continue, because right now we have no checks and balances with the way our government is currently comprised, with an attorney general who does not report to anybody, by the way. Our attorney general does not report to the governor, does not report to necessarily the General Assembly. He could be that check and balance, but he's not. So if we're not going to make any changes to our leadership, I hate to say, you're out of options, but you may very well be out of options.
Yeah, and I think getting active and getting involved is really the starting point. And then of course the next question is, okay, but how do I do that? And one thing I thought of as you were talking was, well, like, how do these books even get in here to begin with, right? Like, well, like, what are all these workings behind the scenes of public school? I think it's all very opaque and mysterious to parents. What's the process for approving these books? Did the school follow their own process? Maybe this needs a public records request to see exactly how this book got there, how much it cost. And then maybe you can hold the school accountable for not following their own rules when that book came in. Or maybe if they did follow the rules, the next step is to go to a school board meeting or send emails that talk about how you don't think the rules are working if this can get in.
Right.
So,
No, exactly right. Exactly right. But you're risking the ire of the U.S. attorney, being labeled a domestic terrorist. You're going to go out, they're going to come after you federally for making too many APA requests or questioning your school board or your school district. I mean, it's like a catch-22. What is somebody to do? I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I'm struggling with the idea of, where do I go? I make too many APA requests, or I confront a school board member? Am I going to have the federal government coming knocking down my door, calling me an insurrectionist or a terrorist? Or what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much hypocrisy there too, because the AG was like, oh, this isn't my job, but is it the job of the FBI to come into school board meetings and monitor us? No, but it looks like it's your job if you want it to be. Apparently it's the FBI's job if Attorney General Garland directs that to them. So yeah, it's very frustrating, and I think you're right, there's no playbook, and parents kind of are charting new territory when they figure out how to deal with these things. Um, let's
Absolutely.
see. Okay, one last question. This is from and that question was Plandemic. I just like saying the names of people's Twitter names because they're hysterical. So this is from Citizens Lighthouse. So he said the required reading in public schools sometimes includes porn, and it's incredibly disturbing. Some might say there are loopholes in obscenity laws that allow schools to do this when no one else can under the law. What do you think about that?
Well, if you're looking at Rhode Island state law, there are loopholes, and when it comes to distributing obscene material. You look at 11.9.1.1, which prohibits child nudity in publications, and there's a big loophole in there because it's got to be for commercial purposes, and schools are clearly not doing this for commercial purposes. So there is a big loophole in there. So if you put something like a publication that has actual child nudity in there, and it's not being used for public uh, uh, or for pecuniary gain or commercial purposes, you could find a loophole. Just like in the child porn law, there is another loophole that many people don't know. Um, Child porn, it is not considered child porn, and I can say this with definitive statement because it's actually written into the law. But child porn is definitely excludes showing the breasts of a female who's under 18 if that's all it's shown and she's not involved in a sex act. Did anyone know that? That's not child pornography in Rhode Island. So it's
That is
just saying,
shocking.
just taking a topless picture. So somebody a female under the age of 18, taking a picture or having a picture taken of her breasts, not engaging in any other sexual acts, not with anybody else. That alone does not constitute child pornography. Did you know that?
No, I'm absolutely floored because I mean, for lots of reasons that are going through my head, but I mean, and yet isn't there a big debate about showing nipples on Twitter or something? You can't, men
Yeah,
can show their nipples but women can't. Right. Okay. And I know that's a different animal, but I'm just shocked. I mean, what an easy way
yeah,
to objectify a young girl. It's amazing.
yeah. I mean that he asked about loopholes in the law. There are plenty of them. And like I said, yeah, I'm not here to say these laws are ironclad and that Norona's stance on these things is utterly wrong. He may very well be right down the line if he's doing the proper analysis, but certainly these laws could be better. And I think that they've over the years different administrations have done a good job of trying to identify areas of the law that need to be tightened up to protect either kids or whatever area they might be looking at in that situation. And this is a perfect area that we could be seeing an appropriate role for the attorney general to say, hey, listen, I want to do this. I want to help these parents. I want to make sure kids stay safe. I don't have enough tools in my toolbox to do that. The general role for the attorney general is not to make the law; it's to enforce the law. But there is an appropriate way for the attorney general to say, please help me by changing the law or tightening up or defining it a little bit more, so I can be a little bit more successful and make a stronger argument in court. So, there certainly are loopholes that these schools could use to get around and put publications in their libraries, perhaps like this book, and escape any kind of penalty that may face them.
Yeah, I think it would be good for everybody, to just say that this is black and white. We don't have to think twice about it, and there's no debate or controversy. Because let's face it, if this book really is about helping transgendered kids, helping kids come out of the closet, helping people deal with their sexual orientations, I'm sure we can do that without cartoon images of kids doing sex acts, right? Like there's got to be another way that we can have books that help kids that are transgendered, and this does not have to be the only way.
I would certainly hope there would be a better way. At least, I mean, I would hope to God that there would be a better way to do it than making them look at images like that. Because I mean, it's got to be tough enough to be a first place to be in that situation where you're struggling with your identity, and then to look at that and I don't know what that does to a kid. It didn't happen to me. I was never in that situation. So I'm not going to pretend like I know what it's like to go through that. But there's got to be a better way than saying this is the only way we can do it. This is what we're going to promote. I mean, you can how about have a class? How about have instructions from people who have gone through it? Sharing their experiences in a way that's a little bit less graphic, perhaps. And
Yeah.
I'm no prude.
Yeah.
I'm no prude. Trust me when I tell you, I am no prude. I'm not a pearl clutcher. I am not about banning books. I'm not about banning, uh, you know, general, legal pornography in general. I think everybody can do whatever they need to do. If that's what fits your fancy, go right ahead. I am against child pornography, and I am against kids being involved in all that in any kind of sex acts with adults or anything that's going to harm them. But I'm not saying this from a position of prudishness. I'm saying this from a position of let's figure out what the best way is to help those in need and do it in a way which doesn't have to be so objectionable to the rest of the community.
Yeah, thank you. That was very well put. I mean, I think that's an answer that I wish we all heard from the Attorney General when he was on the radio.
I wish we had heard it too, and I think it's one among many reasons why I'm running to be the Attorney General next year on the 2022 ballot to replace Peter Narona, because I do believe that not only in this situation, but we saw it during the 2020 election, his refusal to defend state law in federal court with the mail-in ballots. I think that's what threw me over the edge to get him in there. He didn't even bother showing up to court to defend our state law in federal court, which was, I believe, a dereliction of his duty, just like this is. And I think we just need to do better in that position. That's why I'm doing this. Nicole, we've come to the end of our show. I really, really appreciate you having this discussion with me here tonight. Certainly, I'd love to give you the opportunity to, close out as far as, where people can follow you and get your updates on your next steps. I know you're involved in a lot of different legal actions going on right now, a lot of different grassroots actions. Tell our audience a little bit about where they can follow you.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Nicoletta0602. It's on the screen. I have the NEA lawsuit hearing coming up on December 1st, where they're suing me and we motion for summary judgment. And they submitted like a 50-page objection to our motion to tell us why they think they can break the law. So that's next. And still just fielding questions from parents that reach out to me, trying to help everyone I can, before the end of the day. And if you send me a message and I can't get back to you, I'm just doing the best I can. And I hope everyone keeps asking questions of their school boards, sending in those emails, sending in those public records requests. Don't settle for non-answers, and keep fighting for your kids.
Nicole Solis, you're a hero to a lot of people, and you're a patriot for doing what you're doing, questioning the government, hold them to high standards, and make sure that they're accountable. And I think that a lot of people would, I want to say on behalf of I know a lot of people, thank you for what you're doing. It takes a lot of guts to stand up to the people that you're standing up to, and take the flack that you're taking from the people who decide to give it to you. And I appreciate it from a perspective, a legal perspective, from a moral perspective, and I know a lot of people feel the same way. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for joining me here tonight and discussing the issues here on Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law. Thank you all for joining us again on another Wednesday night. This concludes our episode tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all here back on the Coalition Radio Network for another episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law. You can reach me at the law firm of Inman and Torgy in Coventry, Rhode Island, 401-823-9200. You can check out my website for my campaign to be the next Attorney General at Chas, C-H-A-S, the number 4AG.com. If you're interested in my campaign, feel free to reach out and I get back to as many people as possible. And you can always catch me here on Wednesday night, 8:15 on Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, here on the Coalition Radio Network. Thank you again for joining us, everybody. Enjoy your evening, and I hope